have to admit here, when you hear numbers like that from some of the banks, that the optics of talking about deregulation are perhaps made tougher. Would you agree?
Well, Julia and Kevin, great to be with you. You know, my approach is this is the 7th anniversary of Dodd-Frank. And Dodd-Frank's promise was that we would have a more competitive, safer banking system with more choices for consumers. And what it's resulted in is our big banks are getting bigger and still have their institutional risk of being too big to fail. And our community banks and small broker dealers and our consumers are not as well off in terms of financial choice. So on this day, we're not celebrating Dodd-Frank, but we're celebrating working for 6 years on the ideas to fix it. And we believe that's a bill we passed in the House just a few days ago called the Financial Choice Act, which will right-size our regulatory approach and not be one size fits all.
Well, Congressman, I'm glad you brought that up because, the House Budget Committee earlier this week passing a markup, advancing it to the floor, could get a vote on it next week. But the Choice Act, or the repeal of Dodd-Frank, could actually be attached to other pieces of legislation. So healthcare is likely to fail, but what realistically can get done by the end of the year with regards to deregulation? Get specific for us. What specifically can get done with tax reform and also Dodd-Frank reform?
Right. Thanks, Kevin. Well, first, I think in the area of right-sizing regulation, we ought to agree that our community banks, where we've lost almost a bank a day since the Dodd-Frank Act was signed, we want to tailor regulation for our small local community banks on Main Street. And so I would hope one of our features in Dodd-Frank, which is an off-ramp for community banks from some of the oppressive level of regulation that's prudent for large banks, can be done. So that's number one. Number two, I think this designation of a bank or non-bank is too big to fail. I believe that needs clarification. And I think there are votes in the House and Senate to fix that element. And finally, we want to make sure that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has oversight from Congress. So those three areas, Kevin, are ones that I think are important for us to take action on this year between the House and the Senate and get a bill to President Trump.
What about tax reform, though? I mean, are we still, because there's no plan. I mean, I talk to people up here in New York City and they want specifics on a tax plan and there isn't one. When are we going to get a plan?
And nor are they expecting one, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your previous guest was talking about the process of getting an FY18 budget agreed to by the House and Senate, and that gives us the reconciliation capability so that we're not filibustered in the Senate to move tax reform next. She also referenced the leadership talks between the Treasury and the House and Senate. These are all important to lay the predicate for tax reform, which I hope includes territoriality for Help America Company be competitive by going to territoriality for our large international companies, simplify and lower rates for our families, and to create incentives for more capital formation in our country to grow the economy faster. So simplification, rate modification, and fix this international taxation issue that I think is holding back American competitiveness.